Hello, welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are a returning subscriber, hello, you look amazing. I hope you're having an amazing day. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts? You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. So, absolute no-brainer to hit that subscribe button. I am here with Nancy Halpern. She's a New York-based consultant. She's the founder of Political IQ, which is an organization that really helps find the business impact on the business impact of workplace culture. You're a thought leader. You're a podcast host. You do all kinds of stuff, Nancy. Welcome to the Ethics Experts. So happy to have you on.
I'm pretty tickled to be here. Thank you so much, Nick, for asking me.
So we were talking a little bit before the show, and I'd love to just kind of jump into that. You had a super viral post from this article you shared about, is it the age of the worker? Tell us about that article. First of all, kind of what made you share it, and then we can dive into how that question kind of crosses over this great resignation and this new sort of era of workplace that I think your work can speak directly to in an interesting way.
Well, I've been interested in this topic for probably a long time, but it was clear that COVID was a real, or I should say lockdown, was a real accelerator on some trends that had been building in the workplace for a long time. One of them was clearly the rise of the gig economy, where
Mm-hmm.
people cut their apron strings or umbilical cord to this notion of my company's going to take care of me. Companies don't take care of you necessarily.
Right.
And so, I'm kind of a skeptical, cynic, optimistic person, but
Wow. A lot of
sort
flavors
of,
in there.
yeah, I really, shorthand version, Nick, is I'm a sunny pessimist, is the truth,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm convinced things are going to go wrong, but hey, you never know. Um, I, 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 I think that I'm also a little bit of a rebel. So this idea that power was being challenged from the bottom of the hierarchy was really interesting to me. And working remotely and working from home and the amplification of social media and the voice of Gen Z, all these things were sort of coming together to, I think, challenge organizations. Yeah. So there was this article in the New York Times about that. And I think I've gotten what in 24 hours, like 70,000 views and
Wow.
like 700 comments, and people are fighting in the comments.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah, it's kind of fun to watch. Actually, after this, I have to go like thank like 70 people or 700 people, whoever they are, for even commenting on it.
It's
So
like
I think
shaking up
it's,
an ant farm sometimes on LinkedIn, isn't
yeah, you don't know what's going to crawl out underneath those ants.
it? For real. So the what is it that folks are kind of fighting about in the comments? Is it a different sort of view of the world, or is it sort of rooted in their own sort of anxiety about these new generations coming into their workplaces? Like, what would you distill down these points of conflict to?
It's so interesting because I'm also, of course, a political junkie, especially on office politics.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are saying, I've been looking for a job for 2 years and I can't find anything. So I don't think employees have so much power.
Mm.
Other people are saying those spoiled brat Gen Z and millennials, they could get jobs if they wanted to. They're just collecting unemployment. So there's, some kind of chest beating that I think reflects the greater zeitgeist.
Mm-hmm.
I think other people are weighing in saying, well, you may think you're powerful now, individual employee, but AI is going to replace all of you. In fact, some guy posted a photo of like a kind of Starbucks coffee machine in
Mm.
an airport that totally replaced a barista. And he's like, see, you won't even have to ask anyone for your cup of coffee anymore. So employees like pound your chest now, but it's not lasting. And then there are other people who say, this is a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
You have many organizations that are run by older white guys, and there's a lot of pushing, on that floor to break that ceiling, be it for people of color, women, LGBTQ. So it's overdue. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a real diversity that I think reflects a lot of the divided opinion right now in our country about so many things.
Yeah, there's probably no kind of clear answer, and it's probably a mix of all those things. And at some level, maybe they're all right at some level
Or
or
at some
whatever.
level,
Yeah.
at some level, I guess everybody, even a broken clock, they say is right twice a day. But I'm always curious when there's this much heat and energy.
Right.
around something. And I do think there's this huge tension between people who are saying, I don't need a reason to go back to the office. I need a reason to leave home.
Mm,
And I've proven to you, employer, that I can get the job done if you measure me by output. So what's all this FaceTime nonsense in a way, that I have to be visible? And then of course, on management's point of view, it's like, hey, we're locked into this real estate for offices, small or large. I don't know how to manage people I can't see
right.
or track, and I don't know what I'm giving up. And so I think you have a real tension. And mm, I think over time will resolve that, but right now, I think there's a lot of heat on both sides of this question.
Yeah, there are, and in our business, I feel so mixed on it because I have some teams
You,
where, yeah, I have some teams where them being remote, they haven't missed a beat and everything's good to go. And some of these other teams where things are moving faster, and it might be my own style, or it might just be the nature of our work, where it seems like we have to be around each other to really be performing to the same level that we used to. So I don't know. It's just to your point. It's like it's this new normal. Not to like chew on a cliche too much, but it is kind of a new normal that everybody's sort of adjusting to, and we have these new generations coming in. We have this new sort of, um, like labor mobility is at an all-time high, even more so than it was 5 years ago. Do you know what I'm saying? With Zoom, for example.
yep,
I mean, there are people on our team that I've never met face to face, and they've been around for a long time. So again,
right.
5 years ago, I would have probably, even though I am a millennial and of these sort of newer generations, I would have probably never guessed that I'd be in this situation. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you're already an antique.
Well,
I
hey,
was just,
take it easy now.
well, no, I'm saying that from like a dinosaur. Okay.
I
So
get it.
don't
I know
worry
what
about it.
antique means.
Yeah, no, well, you know what dinosaur means, right? No, I was just writing about this in my newsletter today about, the push that Gen Z is making against certainly Gen X, poor Gen X, but also
Totally.
against millennials. And when you were talking about some of your teams work really well remotely and others don't, I think you have it isn't it's so much more complex, Nick, than
Totally.
just let's schedule hybrid, right? It's the individual personalities,
Mm-hmm.
it's the nature of the function,
Yep.
it's the pace of the industry, it's
Pace of growth.
it's growth, it's working style,
Totally.
it's need for connection. And there's also, I
That's
heard
a big
some,
one.
yeah, I heard some really cool futurists during much earlier when we were in real lockdown talk about heads down versus heads up work.
Mm.
So a lot of these postings are really by people who do head down work, meaning on your laptop, right? Your heads down, versus people we consider them what frontline or bricks and mortar retail or first responders who are heads up work.
Interesting.
And I think some of the heat on my posting, and I was just reposting an article.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I mean, um, is really a class conflict as
Oh.
well, a socioeconomic class conflict between
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
those who can stay home, either because they have the physical space that allows them to stay home and they have a heads down job, versus those who cannot stay home, either because their home environment is really not conducive to work and or they have the kind of job where they physically have to be there, and typically lower paying jobs, frankly. I mean, I have a client, they cannot get staff in their warehouse, which is going to hugely impact Christmas sales for them, but nobody wants to work in a warehouse in Indiana at such and such an hour. Now, I don't know where those people are going to work instead, but I do think there's a whole class issue here that we're not really talking about.
That may be the biggest issue. It's like the silent fight, the silent tension that, to your point, is right below the surface. That a lot of these heads down folks who have a nice apartment that they can work in, that, we all hate being isolated, and there's a bunch of sort of negative externalities, mental health things that can come along with that. But to your point, it's kind of hard to sympathize with somebody who's really thinking, well, should I, risk all this stuff to go and make what I can make sitting at home, collecting unemployment, for example, if in fact that is what the decision set is. Like, you can maybe sort of intellectually empathize with it, but it's hard to really put yourself in those shoes and really, frankly, to like throw stones until you've walked a mile in those shoes. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, and especially in large cities where you had lots of people of means who were
Great
commuting.
point.
And what they're saying is, I don't really want that commute. A large part of the pushback, I think, has been about the commute,
Great
right?
point.
Not about being in the office. I thought early on, I wrote a newsletter, it's probably one of my most popular ones ever, about the cranberry problem of returning to the office. And it was basically about the elevators. How, if you can only have 4 people in an elevator and you're in Midtown Manhattan, possibly get people back to the office in any kind of reasonable workflow?
Totally.
And you can't crack it because it's a constraint. So we keep talking about this as if it were some kind of mass return, but it isn't a mass return. It's all these pockets of individuation
Totally.
and difference. And as a small business owner, I think small business owners they have in some ways, more restraints because they usually have cash flow restraints, but they also have
Mm-hmm.
more flexibility. You're a huge corporation where you have to scale every solution. I'd hate to be working in that kind of environment charged with having to figure all this out.
Yeah. And you said something pretty smart. You said a lot of smart things so far.
Hey, thanks.
But you said something pretty smart. It's not like, well, just do this. It's this like confluence of all these individual decisions and all these individual marginal trade-offs that people are assessing and picking one way or the other. Or, it's a lot messier. Like, from a distance, it can seem
Oh, very
like a monolith, to your point, but it's really 1,000 little, million little decisions that are, it's like the birds are starting to fly south, and I saw this massive, I don't know what they're called, but just a huge like flock of birds, and it's all kind of moving together, but they're each one kind of reading the people around, the birds around them, and like at some at some level it almost looks like a big horde or something, but it's a bunch of little birds making their own little decisions. You know what I mean?
And the other thing that's interesting in that flock, of course, is there's always a sequence. There's always
Yeah,
someone in the
right,
lead,
right,
isn't
right,
there, right?
exactly.
And so nature by itself off of sorts into hierarchy. It just
Mm-hmm.
does, right? But right now, that's a really unpopular idea. And that's something I see Gen Z really pushing up against because they want more power. And I think for lots of good reasons, right? Between Me Too and George Floyd, and again, the sort of amplification of voice. But you look at your geese, I mean, if they were geese, whatever they
Mm-hmm.
were,
Yeah.
and they have self regulated into a form, into a structure that
Right.
makes sense so they can move forward and make progress. Organizations are the same way. So right now, a lot of this stuff is really slowing down organizations. It doesn't mean the things that are being talked about are not critically important. And I do worry about issues around equity in the sort of remote work, hybrid work, invisible workforce organization. But dismantling hierarchy, I think, is really probably not going to happen.
Well, it's
But there's going to be
unnatural to some level,
to
is it
some
not?
level, I think it is. But, it sort of reminds me in a weird way. I was in Central Park today with my dog, and my dog lives to chase squirrels. I mean, that's basically that and a good bone. That's all she cares about. And some lady started to like scold me that it wasn't funny that my dog was chasing squirrels. And I looked at her like, they're animals.
Yeah. Do
I
you think
mean,
I
what do you
trained
think?
this into my dog?
Right, I never, give me a break. She's a dog. Dogs
Right.
chase squirrels. She was so horrified because she
Imagine
was,
that.
imagine that. She was watching the birds, sort of like you were. But yeah, I mean, humans are animals. We try to not give in to all our base instincts. I don't know where we're straying now, and I'm probably guilty of it. But I just find all these issues trying to predict the future of work is impossible because in some ways money typically wins. But I am so rooting against people like Jamie Dimon, against people like Mark Zuckerberg. I am so rooting against them. And
You're
so
rooting against the lizard people, it sounds like.
I guess I am. I didn't really call them, are they called lizard
I'm
people? See,
kidding.
I didn't
I'm
know
kidding.
that.
I'm kidding. Uh,
Maybe not. Maybe they should
maybe
be called
not.
lizard.
Yeah, yeah. Um, But you're rooting against them. Why? Because it's just the sort of embodiment of just sort of myopic dollar over everything. Money is the almighty God of everything type of thing.
Well, I like money. I mean, we all really do like money, even if it means just to pay our rent and have a little bit of security.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's the arrogance in um, people being necessary fuel for the business model. So in the Facebook example, right, their business model is selling your data to advertisers, sort of with your knowledge, but not completely with your knowledge,
Totally.
right? So tracking everything about you so they can feed that back in to sell you more stuff. So you are their product, whether you want to be or not, right? And so that business model, and I think we've seen some of the ways it's, unfortunately been used. I'm not saying it doesn't connect far-flung family and friends and do a lot of social good, but I don't like how it utilizes people for profit. Jamie Dimon, just because I think he says asinine, out of touch things, like insisting that they're really becoming more flexible at Citibank because now people don't have to work on Saturday anymore.
The guy's a prince.
Isn't he though? I know. Like Mother Teresa, you're going to have to like knock off your pedestal for Jamie,
Yeah.
or about how people who don't like the commute, oh, get over it. And I'm thinking, get over it. Give me a break.
Yeah,
Okay. You were flown in from your helipad, from your God knows what in the Hamptons or Westchester or Barbados or something. So I think there's a real disconnect when you're on top of something that large for the human experience.
Yeah, isn't that funny how quickly you can forget? Like at some point, he was a low-level guy, grinding, working probably 80 hours a week in the investment bank. I don't know what the guy's background was, but that wasn't centuries ago. I mean, that was within his lifetime. It was probably within, I don't know, 30 years or something, 40 years.
I'm not as nice as you, maybe because I'm not in the ethics space, but I mean, my conviction is, my assumption, I don't know, he probably grew up with some means, maybe not, right? But either way, probably went to Harvard. I went to the B school and was set out to do nothing but make money. Now, if that's his goal, that's fine. Good for him. I had a different goal. Mine was always intellectual challenge, but okay. But there's just something about the increase of disconnection and arrogance in certain industries at the top, and certainly banking and tech have been such deeply bro industries.
Totally.
I don't like the way women have been treated in those industries, and that's a big deal for me.
It's pretty sick, actually, especially with tech, and I would kind of expect a little bit more from tech, I think. I don't know why. But
why?
I don't know, because it's like newer, or it's like West Coast more, or like the people that I know that live in Silicon Valley are very sort of forward-thinking, progressive. It's just like those businesses are based in areas that are kind of steeped in this more sort of egalitarian or altruistic, at least on the surface, kind of sensibilities. And yet we have what we're talking about is not like, it's not the exception to the rule. Do you understand? It's like normal.
But everything you're saying, of course, in to put it into action, often involves a sacrifice of something.
And it's a sacrifice of my own power or their own power or whoever at the top's power. And it's like, well,
right. And money.
Totally.
And not chasing after shareholder value this quarter. And actually values not being like a nice slogan on the wall. Somebody has to give something up. And usually people, it's like, why this expression about, oh, it's as easy as stealing candy from a baby is so stupid. If you've ever tried to steal candy from a baby, like that baby's not letting go.
Totally right.
Most people don't want to let go of what they have. And that's the resistance, I think, towards going back to the office is, you gave me something. You didn't mean to give it to me. You had to give it to me. I've now proven, for the most part, that I can use it responsibly. Though I do think, Nick, there really could be an increase in worker surveillance, things that are in your laptop. What do you think of that, right? Because that's sort of in your space.
It just grates against me. It really does. Like, we were talking to a friend, and she was talking about her business, and she was talking about how she's kind of put these controls on like laptops, and she can see when people are clocked in and stuff. And like, I don't know, just in my stomach, I was just like, ooh, don't want to do that. But like, obviously get the argument for it. Like I get the economic argument for it. I get the operational and management argument for it. I get the risk. Like you hear about, the gig economy is almost on like steroids, where you have people like having two kind of full-time jobs, like they have two laptops up. So
I
like,
read about that
there's a
too.
bunch of moral hazard potential,
Yep.
and it's probably happening, but it feels, I don't know why. I don't know why I'm so like against it. I don't know if it's my personality or where I come from or where my family
I
comes from. I just like
I could totally understand. That's like 1984. It's like
totally,
Big Brother
totally.
watching you. On the other hand, I could certainly hear someone in some company cut a deal that goes like this. Okay, you want to work from home 3 days a week every week. You don't want to spend the money on the commute or give up the time. Totally get it.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to be able to know what you're working on. So here's the deal. If you want that, then we have software in your office issued laptop that knows what you're logged into and what hours you're keeping. And that's the deal. And the problem with that is some companies are so afraid of talent flight. But I think it's going to settle down.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
probably
think it's
will.
all going to be this power of the employee. I mean, I hate to say it, I'm already looking for companies that are doing that sort of spyware and sort of tracking it just intellectually. Is this going to be a growing trend or not? If it is, maybe I should invest in it.
Yeah, maybe you should. But I just think, human beings are pretty smart. And every time there's a system, there's always a way to game the system. And I mean, you can get a little software again.
Yeah, it's true.
You can get a little software that moves your mouse
That's
every
true.
10 minutes or something, so it looks like you're doing stuff.
Well,
I don't know.
but that's probably what I should really invest in, right? Not the tracking software,
Yeah,
the
break
tracking,
the
the
tracking software.
anti-tracking
There we
software,
go.
right?
That's where you're gonna get
That's
the real bucks. They're the real Bitcoin,
that's
maybe. Yeah.
that's really clever. I like that. And you're right, there will be some people who will do that.
Yeah, but it's always going to be a tail. It's not going to be everybody doing that. Probably the most of the people will conform to it, and they'll take that trade off and they'll do that math at the margin and say, yeah, it's probably worth it because I'm a conscientious person and I'm not trying to work two jobs at once. The overwhelming majority of people are not trying to have two laptops and two full-time W-2 jobs. I don't think.
Well, I hope hey, if they can handle it and do the work, good for them.
Maybe that's why employment's up. I don't know.
I mean, but in a sense, I mean, this is my kind of utopia, right? Let's say, I mean, so I own a company. I mean, I own a small consulting firm, but I own a company. And one of my employees has two jobs. How much do I care? Well, if I'm paying full benefits and the other company is paying full benefits, is that person getting a free ride? Or is that person getting everything done that I need done?
Well, that's a great question. So let's push into this kind of thought experiment. Let's push into this thought experiment a little bit more. So
Okay.
It's a sales job, and you have a quota of this person. They have a quota of $750,000 a year of sales, and a top end goal that only 2% of people can hit of $1 million of sales per year. If that person can hit that in 2 hours of work per day, hit the million. Do you really care if they are working 3 or 4 other jobs?
Yes, I do. Here's why I might care. Then that goal is too low.
No, but I'm saying you have a big enough sample set to say, I've been doing this for a long enough time where $1 million is a stretch goal, and the average person is only going to hit that 1 out of 5 years. And really, if they can hit the 750, I'm going to be happy paying them full time. But you have this other person, or think about it on a sales development type of role where these people are supposed to be, sending out emails and calls all day, and you're hoping that they do, 20 appointments a month. Well, if they can make 20 calls and get 20 appointments, I get it would be great if they could make 200 calls and make 200 appointments. But I'm saying on a relative basis, from an expectations management perspective, if this person is knocking it out of the park with a marginal amount of effort, do you really on balance care, or would you want to keep that top performer even if it's only taking them 25% of their workday to achieve it?
I think I could argue this out of all the sides of my mouth.
Same here.
Right? Yeah, because on the one hand, if you're working 2 hours, and of course, before I said you should measure people on output, so now I'm just going to contradict myself. If you're working 2 hours and I'm paying you for 8, and it's out of my pocket, right? Something's going to feel wrong.
Yeah, I know.
Me. It just is, right? And I do mean it seriously. If you're achieving a stretch goal in 2 hours, it's just logical to me to say there's something wrong with that goal.
Hmm.
Because a stretch goal should not be able to be achieved in two
Sort of
hours
by definition.
by definition.
Right.
Otherwise, there's really something wrong with the goal setting.
Yeah.
You know, if someone is, I mean, by definition, a full time job means full time, in that you can only do it full time. If it's possible to do it in much less, I would say let's turn it back to the organization to rejigger job definition
Well,
and to rejigger how we hire people. The problem is a lot of companies tried to save all this money by hiring contractors so they wouldn't have to pay perks. And now you have people who probably do have multiple contract jobs and they're not servicing any client full time. So, companies get greedy and then they get upset if individuals want to do the best they can for themselves.
I have a kind of a theory.
What's your theory?
Buckle up. Ready? Um, so
Sure.
this is like a microeconomic theory that there's just a tremendous amount of dead weight loss in our organizations, and organizations have just grown accustomed to this level of dead weight loss, and it can be sort of tied down to the level of engagement, employee engagement. So if employee engagement across the entire economy is at 70%, which is what a lot of different studies have shown, like people are putting forth 70% of their effort, that's kind of like a low C kind of an effort. And that's what folks have kind of grown to expect. It's like we're running, it's like we're riding a bike that has 30% of the air out of the tires. So, maybe this goes back to what you're saying. Well, on a goal basis, our stretch goals are automatically sort of dampened by this historical experience that we've had over the past, whatever, at least several decades, as sort of, MBAs have sort of ascended to the top of organizations and so forth. What we've come to expect from our workforce is naturally sort of, the natural headwinds of lower employee engagement have caused us to set goals that, to your point, we think are stretch that aren't actually stretch goals. So to the extent we can get that engagement higher, and there's 1,000 different things that could potentially lead to that, and that could be like the main driver for outperformance or alpha generation from an investment perspective, between sort of like companies in the same industry. To the extent that we can start to affect that, all that's going to fall to the bottom line. But the real headwind that we're talking about here is an engagement thing.
Well, I'm surprised to hear engagement is as high as 70%, frankly. I mean, a lot of my clients would be thrilled. And of course, it always depends how you measure
It
engagement.
is. And,
I,
and to be clear, I'm not saying 70% of employees are highly engaged or engaged. I'm saying that, if there's such thing as 100% effort, people are putting forth 70% of their potential effort
I see. I also don't think, for the most part, stretch goals are set too low. I think
in general.
actually, no, I don't. I
Okay.
mean, I think usually what happens is stretch goals are set without consideration to the organizational impediments to achieving them.
Mm.
So, for example, this you need a system upgrade in the organization to be able to track something or get data to help you focus sales,
Hmm.
and that upgrade is number 8 in the queue this year, right? And it's never happened, right? It's not going to happen till like third quarter 2023,
Yep.
and so you are slowed down, and therefore you have to really, bust yourself and work additional hours because you can't obtain the information with the kind of speed or accuracy or just ease you could. And that's just one example.
Yeah.
So, I don't think organizations typically are good at looking at things cross-functionally
Great point.
to gauge impact and dependency.
Right.
They'll give a classic example, product development and sales can really be at each other's throats because the company needs products to sell. They need innovation. Sales is compensated, of course, by just hitting the number. How they hit it will be overlooked as long as they hit the number in total. Not always, of course, but often. So
Hmm.
why would they take a risk on a new product if they have a cash cow? And they may have a quota, and therefore you can incentivize them to sell that new product at a higher rate, but they're still going to maybe go to the cash cow. So I think incentive systems play a lot into how people perform, how they trust their organizations. Again, I'm sorry if I'm going far
No,
afield from
no,
what
no.
you're asking.
I think incentives are probably the most important and like most overlooked, I don't know, martial art in business, if you want to call it that,
Yeah,
you know?
it's a great thing to call it. Well, people don't want to muck with it because, like, for example, I've done a lot of coaching now over 22 years, I think, in the field. And if you give me a sales lead, a VP of sales or executive VP of sales, and say to me, this person is really kind of a pain. They're difficult, they break glass, they're abrasive. And I said, what else? Well, they always make the quota. I said, so what is it you want them to do? We want them to behave differently, but still make the quota. So the salesperson, the head of sales, their response is, what's my incentive to change? You reward me based on the metric, on the number.
Mm-hmm.
So what? And they're right. They're absolutely right. They are uncoachable because there's no reason for them to change.
Yeah,
And so I always find that kind of, weird that companies, they're worried about liability, of course, but it's a waste of money.
right. It's like my wife wants me to do the dishes, but also she wants me to want to do the dishes.
Yeah, like I'll do them, but you can't make me want to do them.
Yeah, but I mean, we are, we as human beings, I think, are, we're good at finding like a path of least resistance. And that means finding like efficiency in a system. So to your point, why would that sales lead who is abrasive or whatever be expending additional calories that are perhaps even contrary to how they're naturally wired to get
Exactly.
compensation of zero when they're
Well,
already
yeah, but
sort of optimizing, they're already winning the game in the terms of the rules that are in place, you know?
exactly. But see, I blame the company because the company wants to have their cake and eat it too. The company does not want a potential lawsuit from a hostile workplace or any kind of
Yep.
liability. So they want the person to change, but they don't want to fire that person or get rid of that person or reprimand the person because the person delivers so much revenue to the company.
Right. Right. It's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting thing. It seems like we're starting to get into this sort of like workplace politics realm that you're an expert in. I want to
I
dive
can't
deep.
help it.
Well, no, I mean it's everything. It's like all of it. It's how the different gears touch each other. You know, I mean you can design a really cool engine on a CAD system or something, but at the end of the day, you got to get some grease in that. Once it's built, the
Right.
nature of that grease, whether it's clean or it's dirty, or the lubrication and the viscosity of it is going to have a determinant on how well that machine, that regardless of what is in theory, how that actually kind of runs. I want to dive deep into this because I'm super interested in it. It seems, it's my sort of operating, it's my operating assumption that the only sustainable competitive advantage in business is culture. If it is in fact an advantage, I guess it can be. And a culture is just this sort of sum total of behaviors and beliefs and values that are actually lived out within an organization, irrespective of what the organization sort of claims that it espouses. And I think, workplace politics are kind of an anti-culture in some ways, especially when they have like a negative, slant. From your standpoint, when does workplace politics start to like rear its, ugly head in an organization in terms of size or in terms of like age? What are kind of the early warning signs that a culture can start to become infected, relative to the, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed goal that was behind the typing or the writing of the words on the wall or the words on the mission page? You know what I mean?
Well, it starts with how you define politics and if you see it as bad or good, right? I don't necessarily see it as bad or good. I think that, my family is intensely political. We sit around the Thanksgiving table. There's three of us who want the wing on the turkey. That turkey still only has two wings. There's lobbying, there's influencing, there's negotiation,
Okay.
there's power. You know, every organization, I don't care if it's chess club or high school cheerleading, there's politics because, like your flock of geese, there are hierarchies, there are pecking
Okay.
orders,
Okay.
right? And what I figured out in business school, sorry, I'm one of those MBAs, is that, politics comes from the Greek word for group decision making. That's the original definition of the
Okay.
word. That's all it means. And anytime you are competing for limited resources, and resources are always limited,
Mm-hmm.
then you have politics.
Okay.
And so then it's a question of what's the intention? So, what are the early warning signs that an organization is dysfunctionally political?
Yeah. Okay.
Is when politics are done for the intention of my betterment over yours. So, politics has been confused with the word conquest.
Which I did maybe in my sort of preamble to this
Everyone, yeah,
question. Yeah.
you and 90% of the world. I mean, I'm in the screeching minority who's like,
Story of
just
your
because.
life, I think.
Yes, how did you know?
Yeah,
As much the screeching as the minority. Because it's just, you can just see it around you.
totally.
Who's popular? Who's cool? Who's a geek? Who's in that clique? Who's getting the teacher's attention? Who's this? Who's that? I mean, it's always there.
Right.
But if it's used for my own selfish means, then I would say that's dysfunctional for a business or a nonprofit or any organization. If you are reading the chessboard, if you are building alliances, if you are managing information flow to help yourself, that's okay, your team, your division, and the organization meet its objectives, then I'd call that strategic. I mean, I did do a workshop on this for a group of, it happened to be emerging female leaders at a big biotech. And we were talking about all this, and one of the women said, yeah, but it sounds so manipulative. And I said, yeah, and when men do it, it's called strategic.
Right.
I mean, the
Interesting.
root of the root of the
Interesting.
word the root of the word manipulative is manual, right? You manipulate clay. You use your hands when you manipulate something. It also means deceitful. So I was teaching again and doing some workshops around this for a very big tech company on the West Coast. And there was someone from, I think, Germany, and we were talking about those two definitions of manipulate. And he said, it's really interesting. When I learned English, I never learned that other definition of it, something like you manipulate clay. Never learned it. So these definitions of what's political in an office, we hate office politics or being manipulative, are really, I think, restrictive misinterpretations of the term. So when you see somebody acting to hoard information, you see someone gossiping and it comes back to you about you. You see people being promoted without merit, but through favoritism. You see teams not aligning around goals because people are protecting their functions versus having a broader enterprise view, be that across a team, a division, or organization. Those missing deliverables, can't make the roadmap, clicks within the team itself, little alliances of only two people here, people running to the manager to complain about someone else they work with. Those are all signs of dysfunctional politics.
So my question earlier was like, well, when do you see that happen? And it's like, it probably happens at all sizes, at all times. Like there's probably no like red flag, remember that old Malcolm Gladwell book that said like, man, the culture really changes at 125 people or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it hits that tipping point of size. But the way you described this kind of, I mean, that can happen in a company of 5 people. I mean, it can actually happen in a group of 3 people. There's always 2 people that are closer than the third. It's like we have a bias to like for outsiderism or something.
We do. I mean, I'm not sure I buy that Malcolm's 125. It's interesting because I actually work with this company now, and they are scaling up. So it's interesting to watch this kind of dynamics that happen.
Just stopping at 125, you like hiring freeze.
I don't think so. I think it's different kinds of politics. For example, I've worked with several companies that are founder led. Oh my God, those politics are insane.
Oh wow, in a bad way. Like to your point.
I think it's the worst family you've ever had. It's like working for your dad or your mom and all your siblings. It's like Succession, I mean, it's really intense. On the other hand, if let's say you're in a huge company, then where are those chess pieces moving? Who's kissing up to the board? Who are they going to focus on? Someone who is a domain expert in the field, or someone who, let's say, comes from operations or sales? And what are the tensions? So, you can but again, it's not always bad.
No, totally.
No, because if you say to someone, what makes someone a skillful, not an evil, a skillful politician? Well, influence skills, negotiation skills,
right,
communication skills.
Coalition building. I mean,
coalition building, a little bit of charm doesn't hurt.
Right.
None of those are evil.
necessarily, to your point.
necessarily. It depends on intent
Right.
and usage.
Yeah, and like focus of the, to the extent these are weapons, like where's the focus of that weapon? Is it focused toward the good? And is that good actually good? Or is it sort of a selfish aim
Yeah.
for your own? Yeah, yeah. It's really a fascinating, you really picked a pretty fascinating pool to swim in. I mean, this is pretty
Thanks. I
cool.
can't say it's lucrative, but it definitely is fascinating. But my team and I built a model. We got it validated.
Cool.
I mean, we have 24 variables you can test a culture against, and it sort the data by gender or generation
Wow.
or function or geography to see, how are these behaviors? How do they play out? But I do think you can, the minute you strip people away from their assumptions and fear about language, you can open up their thinking.
What do you mean
But
by
when
that?
people, well, if people decide that politics is bad,
Just
they're done,
got it.
done, done. Why would they want to learn to do something that's bad?
Right.
I don't want to learn to manipulate people. Oh, being strategic about people. Oh, that sounds okay. It's the same,
Totally.
it's a
Yeah.
label.
Yeah. There's a label and there's sort of almost an assumed intent behind a, neutral word or something.
Well, ethics, right? People think being political, quote unquote, is highly unethical. Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. I mean,
Right.
do you say, I mean, go back to the washing the dishes, I mean, you may not want to, but it's part of the obligation. And maybe it's a small price to pay for harmony and peace,
Yeah. For
you
not sleeping
know?
on the couch. Right.
Well, exactly. And so what? It doesn't become an ethical quandary.
Totally.
I don't really feel washing it. I don't,
Totally.
I'm not one with the dishes. I'm like, no, just wash the,
Just do them. Yeah. Yeah.
friggin' dishes. Yeah.
So that 24-point model sounds pretty interesting. Tell me about some surprises that came out of that process of building that model with your team and getting it validated. Were there any things that really were like, oh my gosh, or was it really a confirmation of all these like intuitions and sort of thoughts that you've accumulated over your years of, you know, being in this game?
I'd say there were two real surprises. One was I did a really deep dive into the academic research. And I found that there had been a lot of work in both the UK and the US in the late 80s, actually in early 90s in this, a lot of studies, and it stopped very abruptly. And I found out the reason it stopped was because that word political made people so uncomfortable
Crazy.
that it got repackaged as the influence industry. So all those books about like influence without authority and what are your influencing skills, that all came about because business school professors couldn't sell this and make any money. So it became repackaged as influence, but it's
Crazy.
all the
It's
same.
the same stuff.
That was a surprise.
That's wild.
Yeah, I thought so too. The other surprise came from my team and how hard they pushed on me to insist that I had to find the positive behaviors so we could teach it. So, for example, I couldn't say, don't throw someone under the bus. I mean, you shouldn't throw someone under the
Yeah,
bus.
yeah.
Okay. But you don't train or consult in an organization and say, don't throw someone under the bus. So, how do you translate that into a positive behavior? And actually, there was a
Mm.
third surprise that was really the most challenging. I pushed back on the team very hard that one of the four pillars, so there's four pillars where these behaviors sit, was reading the chessboard. You
Mm.
had to have it. You had to. And they were like, okay, but these behaviors also have to be observable. How do you know when someone's reading the chessboard?
Ah.
And when you think
It's so
about,
ethereal, but I mean, it's critical, but like, how do you quantify that?
well, exactly. And I don't know if you saw that Netflix series that was a early lockdown hit, The Queen's Gambit,
Mm-hmm.
but she would actually visualize the chessboard on the ceiling. That's how she could project
Mm-hmm.
how to play the game. And so that's a real critical skill. So I had to think really hard. I had to work really hard on breaking down, how do you know that someone has read the chessboard
Mm-hmm.
instead of perhaps is reading the chessboard? Do they collect information? Are they always quoting the outside industry? Do they seem to already know when you tell them something's happened that it's happened?
Right.
So you can see the symptoms almost post reading, because I can't tell you if you're reading the chessboard right now. How would I know what's in your brain? So, sharpening my own powers of observation for these
Yeah.
things, that was really fun, but it was hard work.
I bet that's hard. I read this interesting book, and it was talking about all these different cultures and how sort of cultures are different from country to country. And in Japan, what we're referring to here is they refer to it as like reading the air, and it
Mm.
becomes increasingly important where the external words don't actually match the internal views of things. And in some cultures, and again, I really loved the book because it was able to draw these distinctions between sort of, country cultures that are very different and so forth. But like every company has its own culture and its own position on these different spectra that make up a culture and so forth. So there are different degrees of being able to read the air, and a different like level of importance of having that ability to read the chessboard depending on the culture that you're in.
Was that When Cultures Collide? Is that the book?
It was not that book. I'll have to send it to you after. I forget the
Oh, I
title
love
of it
it.
right now. Yeah.
Thanks. Because When Cultures Collide is similar, and it's really fascinating. I actually first got into this work because I was negotiating overseas in both Egypt and Taiwan. And the way those negotiations unfolded were so different that I was fascinated about how different cultures communicate on business on the same thing.
Yeah, my friend used to he used to work in the auto parts industry in the late '80s, and he just would always tell me the story about he learned very quickly that like when he would go to Japan and they would just say okay, they didn't mean you had the deal per se. You know what I'm saying?
That's
You'll find
right.
out when you have the deal. Whereas in other countries, they wouldn't even give you any sort of positive assent of anything if you weren't getting close to getting that deal.
It's really interesting. It is.
So interesting. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I want to be conscious of time because I feel like we could probably keep going here for a while. But this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on. And where should people hop to find you?
Well, absolutely. Just come find me on LinkedIn. I really think that's the best place, and I'll be happy if we connect to put you on my newsletter and send you some resources if you want them or not. That's really the best place. You can also find me on getpoliticaliq.com or nancyhalpern.com.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So fun.
Was that okay?
That
I
was
hope so.
amazing. No, that was
Oh, really?
so fun.
That
Yeah.
was sweet. Well, I did go all over the map.
Well,
Even I
those are the
always like
funnest
having
ones.
questions, but it never happens.
Yeah, I know. Same here. Yeah, I feel like we could have literally gone for another 30 or 40
So
minutes here.
what is it? What is your work actually? Because is it compliance? Is it ethics consulting? We never really talked about that, and I have wanted to know.
Yeah, so we have a suite of corporate integrity products that help organizations give a voice to their people, to reinforce culture, find risks, and ultimately kind of reinforce their bottom line. So we have whistleblower solutions, software
Wow,
for
cool.
that. We have software for screening and monitoring of an employee base, making sure doctors have the right licenses, and then we have a whole suite of like compliance training that doesn't suck. It all sucks. Can I be
Cool.
honest? It all does kind of
Well, it's
suck,
kind
but
of dull and tedious and horrible, right?
totally it is. But this is less tedious and less horrible than what you're used to.
I'm sure it is. Because you clearly are kind of cool. So I'm
Well,
sure it
thank you.
reflects, you're welcome. I'm sure it reflects your personality and style.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that in there, but yeah, it's a pretty fun business to be in, and it's one of these businesses that I don't know. A lot of the people that we serve are like cost centers. They think that they're cost centers, and they're
Mhm.
kind of beat down. It's like that classic human resource person who gets into it because they want to help people, and then they realize like, oh, I'm just here to help the company, and they're like 30 years in, and they're just like all jaded. Be able to
Right.
breathe a little bit of new life into those folks is really fun, too.
Well, listen, I'm happy to share this obviously in my network and happy to put a video link in my next newsletter.
Yeah, that'd be
So,
great.
whenever it's up or out, just will you drop me a note?
Yeah, yeah. Tara will send you a bunch of stuff so you can do what you like with it. There will be a few different
Cool.
video clips. I was scribbling down notes furiously because there's so many great takeaways from this conversation. But this was really a lot of fun. I'd love to kind of stay in touch and maybe do
I'd
something
like
together again.
I'd like to stay in touch too if there's a way I can help you. You
Likewise.
know, please, thank you. I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I really, and again, I'm very flattered you reached out and asked. So I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, this
Thank
was
you.
a match made in heaven. Now, I did tell you. I told you. I knew this was going to be a home run episode.
You did say that.
I
You
did.
did. It's true. It's true. It's true. And I'm so glad it was. Thank you for making it that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All
See
right.
you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.